Hi, this is Swapnil Bharti, and we are here at KubeCon in San Diego. And today we have two guests. We have Luke Hasty. You are sales director at Nuaware. Is that correct?
Nuaware.
Nuaware. And then we also have Ram Akuka. You are a solution architect at Octarine. So first of all, thanks for being here. Let's just start with you because you cover every region, mostly Europe. And when we look at Europe, they have one of the strict, policies when it comes to either privacy or security of data. GDPR is there already. Then they're also working on Gaia X to make it more, democratize the cloud. So when it comes to all these cloud-ready technologies, how Europe is a bit unique as compared to the US market?
Yeah, I think that the challenges in terms of the different policies are unique to Europe. Ultimately, the problems that we're seeing is that we've got lots of big enterprises that operate in these heavily regulated industries that also want to take advantage of these new technologies. And being able to balance those two things is quite a challenge. It's not just the technology problem. There's the training element of what you need to do, the policy element, the governance element. Yeah, very much so. We're seeing organizations that are struggling to put the processes and tooling in place to be able to leverage things like Kubernetes in such a compliant, stringent world.
And how do you, what role do you play to help this customer with solving all these problems?
Sure. So the role of Nuaware is we for the last 3.5, 4 years have been working in this DevOps and Kubernetes cloud native world. Our job over that time has been to help guide organizations through 3 areas ultimately as to how they can adopt these new types of technology. So we have a reference architecture of tooling, which is complementary to allow enterprises to build a new platform for things like cloud-native apps. We also then work with a number of specific partners who are subject matter experts in things like compliance for cloud. And the final thing that we do is we do run a lot of training to help people adopt and understand these type of technologies.
And you also work with other companies, to bring in their solutions to the customer. So that's where I think you come into the picture, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
So how do you help them?
We don't just help them, we help everybody else in this field. So as Luke mentioned, compliance, and not just compliance, I think control over Kubernetes and assets deployed into Kubernetes or applications deployed in Kubernetes is a challenge across the board, as the way we see it. And it's actually because of 2 major things. Like one of them has to do with Kubernetes. It's not just another layer in the stack. It has more to do with being the unified API layer of the stack in a sense. With Kubernetes, you can easily deploy storage. You can deploy load balancers in the cloud. You have secret, you can access your workload. So there is a lot you can do just by having access into Kubernetes. So now how do you control it? It's not as simple as it was before. And it's also involved, or it has some cultural change in a sense of a company when a lot of the, responsibility is now distributed across many teams. So now you have this one system in the middle called Kubernetes. Workloads are being pushed constantly by different teams with a lot of basically power that they have in their hands. And how do you control it? How do you add, not just for compliance, how do you know what's going on? What are some of the things they do regularly? And this is where we, Octarine, come into place. One of the things we provide is what we call guardrail. And the idea behind guardrail is to give the developers eventually a way to control what can be pushed into Kubernetes and how.
Yeah, I think that's a good point for me to jump in on here as to why we partner with Octarine. So we partner with a few other technologies familiar in this space, people like Twistlock from a container security point of view. Where we feel that Octarine really fits in is within those larger organizations that are adopting new platforms, things like Kubernetes, but don't necessarily have the skill set internally from a developer standpoint to understand how powerful those type of things can be. So we have a large media customer of ours in the UK who are building a brand new private cloud platform based on Kubernetes in their environment. They're onboarding teams as fast as they can, but they ultimately wanted to do so with some of the enterprise guide rails or guardrails, as these guys call it, to make sure that they're not deploying them in a way which could be damaging to the company. And that's where we saw Octarine fit in, and why we feel it really fits in with our current portfolio.
One pattern that I've seen is that it sounds like it's more of a educational problem. It's more a people problem, less of a technology problem. Is that true? Because that's what I see you say.
I think that, yes, I'd probably say that it is more of an education problem. This is a hugely in-demand skill set at the moment. It's a problem that a lot of our customers face, is finding people that understand both the technology and the processes. Plus, there's a huge amount of technology out there. There are a lot of companies that have come up with some solutions to some of these problems, and most enterprises, if they throw enough weight and investment behind any sort of technology, will be able to make a technology successful. The biggest element of making that happen is the people part. So I'd say it's half and half. I would say that the technology is out there, but for the business to be successful, they need the people to operate it in the right way.
From your perspective, do you also, like, in addition to offering solutions, do you also help with the educational part of it?
Absolutely. One of the things we see out there, that people just trying to take whatever they have and make it fit to Kubernetes, especially when it comes to security. But it doesn't always work that way. Kubernetes, in a sense, changed the game a little bit in many ways. So part of what we do is try to educate the market, or try to educate our customers about why they're seeing some of the challenges they see today, and why some of the solutions they have doesn't necessarily fit into Kubernetes, and try to work with them throughout that path, and eventually make them adopt new technologies.
And how does that work? Do you work with them case-by-case basis, or do you have some programs that you offer them?
So we start with usually risk assessment. So part of educating the teams is by showing them where they expose. And I know it's funny, but you don't necessarily know today. Many teams just flying blind. They start moving into Kubernetes. Many teams start pushing workloads into Kubernetes. There is no like one team, security team or DevOps or whatever, actually know what's in there and what's the risk that they have in the cloud. So we provide we call it a free risk assessment, but it's just a tool you can take, download, put it in your Kubernetes, and see a report of what's going on. And where our commercial product has more to do with governments and policies around these risks. So we put the risk in the middle, or the workloads, we call them workloads, in the middle, and the risk. And then you can build basically processes around it to make sure that it's going to fit your compliance, your control, your security. It's up to you.
Do you, like, when you help your customers solve their problem, do you just like work with partner, or do you also work directly with the projects that you are consuming or leveraging to help your customers?
It's a bit of a mix. So where we sit in our ecosystem is we're actually a distributor of products and services. So what we have is a pretty extensive network of partners who are experts at things like Kubernetes engineering. So we work directly with the customer to understand what they need, to suggest tooling which could meet their needs. But we will then also bring in our expert partners who understand that tooling and the workflows around them, so that they can directly implement them in their environment. So yes, we do get hands-on with the customer, whether that's with their technology, with their processes, or just training their teams on things like Kubernetes, HashiCorp, Jenkins, all of the sort of things that surround this type of tooling and project.
Since you have the most direct engagement with the customers and also the providers, what are some of the core pain points? You already mentioned a lot of those, but some of the real technical pain points that you're seeing in this space that you're like, we still need to solve them.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pain points is isolation of not necessarily just data, but enforcing strict multi-tenancy. So what we're seeing is a lot of organizations are shifting to this internal platform as a service model, where you have a core IT team that are responsible for building a compute platform, which is then offered out to the internal customers, the developers, whoever it might be, mainly internal. One of the requirements that we see quite a lot is that they have to then keep those different development teams and development environments separate from each other. And that really is a problem which a lot of organizations are struggling with. And we feel actually that Octarine fits in quite well in that model to enforce that, the east-west segregation. So yeah, I'd say from a technical standpoint, that's where we're seeing a lot of people move, is to this internal platform as a service model, that segregation of duties. But they need to ensure, once again, it comes back down to compliance, who is able to see and do what within their specific domain. Mm-hmm.
What kind of trends that you see in the market, especially as we go into 2020?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the homogenization of Kubernetes. I think that we've watched, from our point of view, with our large enterprise customers, arguably OpenShift was the first thing from an enterprise platform that everyone moved to. Then the cloud providers beefed up their own offerings, and I'd say that 2019 has been the year of the cloud provider, native container and cloud native services. I think 2020 with things like Azure Arc and the multi-cloud approach, we're going to start seeing a lot more multi-cloud tooling, which is platform agnostic ultimately from some of the more existing entrenched players who are happy to move away from the vendor lock-in approach that they may have taken 10, 15 years ago.
Thanks, Luke, and thanks, Ram, for talking about it and trying to explain, what the problem that is there and how, the community is solving this problem with the help from Octarine. And I look forward to seeing you again at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.